Evil Genius was a base building strategy game released in 2004, or as we elderly folks refer to as, the before times. Things were more innocent back then. World of Warcraft hasn't gotten around turning its entire player base into mindless hordes of zombies, and games publishers wouldn't dare utter the word microtransactions without risking mobs of angry fans lining up to piss in their shoes. Now, regular viewers of mine, along with the people I tend to shout at on public transport, are likely familiar with my continual disappointment of the AAA games industry when it comes to a lack of creativity. After all, if your player base is completely okay paying full price for the same games repeatedly over a slight graphics makeover, then why would you ever bother hiring creative people to come up with new ideas? But rather than waste time shitting on the industry as a whole, I figured it's best I tap into my Asian roots and be professional for once by examining both Evil Genius 2 and its predecessor, Tick for Tack, to mathematically determine whether the changes implemented over the space of 17 years is worth the asking price. Plot and characters. Both games start off nice and straightforward. You are a James Bond style supervillain, the world is running dangerously low on existential problems, so go build a giant doomsday superweapon and make everyone's dreams come true. Each game lets you pick from a handful of evil geniuses, and while the sequel does technically have more playable characters than the original, it doesn't deserve any points for it, as there is no meaningful difference between them when it comes to overall plot. Yet unlike the original, Evil Genius 2 can't seem to help itself but bury under a mountain of generic side stories, all of which involves playing out the exact same gameplay loop of sending out minions into the world screen and waiting for the quest timer to slowly tick down. Something akin to the personal hell of every middle management office employee. To make matters worse, the game only lets you tackle one side story at a time, like it's trying to appeal to the type of people who enjoys watching parking meters tick down. 1 point to the original for practicality. Humor. Rebellion was never a company known for having fun dialogue exchanges, as character interactions in their earlier games mostly involved people shooting at each other from across a parking lot, and this shortcoming becomes pretty obvious in Evil Genius 2, with most of the dialogue and character animations coming across as extremely generic and lazy. Unfortunately, the original Evil Genius didn't fare much better in this department, as it went for the Sims approach of having characters speak pure gibberish, apart from the occasional news broadcast. I'm still handing this one to the original though, as they at least had the smarts to feature famous pop culture characters like Bruce Lee or Rambo as the main antagonist, whereas in the sequel, a serious opportunity was missed by not having parodies of the Justice League as your main foes. In this era of non-stop superhero movies, it would have made perfect sense rather than going with characters so dull that could be found in a McDonald's Happy Meal set. Base building. To be perfectly honest, both games are pretty shitty when it comes to the base building aspects, as mechanically they are very outdated, but at least the sequel allows you to modify your rooms without first manually deleting every object inside. But the real improvement of Evil Genius 2 comes in the form of multi-level base building, a feature that drastically reduces the amount of travel time of your minions when running your evil lair. Additionally, your cover operation can now be placed inside of your base, making it far more practical for your staff to manage as opposed to the original game, in which the casino floor had to be left separate from your main base, on the other side of a deserted island in order to meet the criteria of international gambling regulators or something, the stupid tosses. Micromanagement. Okay, the sequel definitely takes this one, as you're finally given enough minions to properly run your base. Unlike the original where you were capped at a maximum of 100 minions, the sequel generously expands your staff limit to 300, meaning that you're able to send out minions to complete an objective without your base looking emptier than the promises of a US politician. What's more, in the sequel, the evil geniuses themselves are capable of rapidly responding to threats, so you never have to worry about facing a sudden game over scream just because a single lone infiltrator managed to bypass their way into your inner sanctum. Replay value. Alright, so this is where things get a bit tricky, as Evil Genius 2 does offer a lot of additional content in the form of paid DLCs. It does make you feel a little cheated to see so much content gated behind a paywall, the greedy assholes. Still, I think I gotta give this one to the sequel, as there simply was no replay value in the original. And as much as I hate companies shaking me down for all my loose change, I think at the end of the day I still prefer some new content over no new content. Arsehole potential. Probably the most important feature of an Evil Genius Sandbox game, and the original knocks this one out of the park, allowing you to torture your captured victims with all sorts of silly contraptions, everything from a giant laser to hours of mindless television, whereas in the sequel your options appear to be a lot more limited. What's more, unlike Evil Genius 2 where the interrogation is only used to acquire more resources, in the original game it served a key role in defeating super agents. Capture a close ally, strap the prick to a centrifuge, and then laugh at them as their forces spew out all their secrets on how to defeat your enemies, then use that information to steal a giant stuffed animal from the super agent's home halfway across the globe, lure the silly todger into your base, and then proceed to shack their favorite childhood toy right in front of their eyes. If only Harvey Weinstein had this game to blow off steam, a lot of Hollywood actors might still be unmolested today. Conclusion. And the final count is... A tie. Well, shit, so much for that whole exercise. I guess we can say that both games are equally fun, and that if you like the original Evil Genius, you'll probably like the sequel as well. But frankly, I expected more. As an overly entitled panda, I demand the very best. So if Rebellion ever gets around to making another one of these, I expect more changes for my money than a slight makeover and a couple new toys.